Hello, and welcome to this Pharma Forum webinar. My name is Dominic Tyre. I'm Pharma Forum's Creative Director, and I'll be moderating proceedings today. So today we're going to be talking about how to make digital work in medtech and reshaping your commercial model. We're going to be discussing key digital lessons from medtech from other healthcare sections, and look at steps to take for a successful digital transformation and how to ensure ROI from digital technology. Now you can see our panelists there on the slide in front of you, and we've got a great setup for you today with panelists dialed in from Denmark, Switzerland, France, and the US too. So they are Jerome Dastos from Edwards Life Sciences, Britton Davis from Critical Insights, Marcus Ott from Excensia Diabetes Care and MedTech Europe, and Lars Diemer from Agnitio. Now, before we kick off proceedings, just a couple of housekeeping points that I'll run through for you. So you can send us questions and comments at any time during today's webinar. And we're going to be splitting the webinar into three sections today. So you can send us questions at any time during proceedings, and we'll try and answer as many of those during the debate as we can. Now, to do that, you can click on the questions button that's at the top of your screen. If you're fond of tweeting and enjoy using Twitter, then you can also tweet about today's webinar using the hashtag #PPWebinar. So we'll be monitoring that, and we can pick up questions from Twitter as well. Now, we are recording today's live webinar, so an archived version will be available shortly after the live event finishes. So if you have a colleague you think would benefit from dialing in or listening in, then you'll be able to send them details for them to listen to the webinar in full at their leisure. And as we go along, I'll be asking you to click on the ratings button too to let us know how we're doing with today's webinar. Now, before we begin with proceedings, we'll have a couple of poll questions. We'd like to get insight from yourselves, from the audience, on some key topics here. So I'm going to trigger the first of those poll questions now, and we'll look at the answers for those in a short while. So the first question, which you should see drop down on your screen now, asks, what are the main factors stopping companies from embracing digital change? Is it that there's no sense of urgency? Is it budget concerns, regulatory concerns? Perhaps the current benefits of digital are unclear, or is there another factor? So if I could ask you to vote on that now, and we'll have a look at how the voting goes later on. So just to bring in today's speakers, so I'll give a little bit more background on them, and I ask them as well, I think, to highlight one observation around digital transformation or customer engagement, just to set the scene. So Jerome, we're going to begin with you. So Jerome Dastos is Digital Marketing Manager at Edwards Life Sciences. So he has extensive experience in both digital marketing and the medtech industry, and leads the development and execution of a digital strategy for transcatheter heart valve therapy. So Jerome, perhaps we can bring you in at this point. And I'd like you to, could you highlight for us one interesting observation in digital transformation?
Yes, thank you, Dominic, and thank you for having me on this webinar. So from my angle, which is really more focused on customer engagement, there are of course many changes happening in the marketplace. A lot more technologies available. But one of the things I wanted to share is what we've been observing with regards to event interaction, and more and more interest for the virtualization of events. So, of course, face-to-face and physical events remain at a pretty central place in our customer engagement ecosystem, but we are using increasingly the digital tools to either enhance the physical experience or completely build experiences outside of physical premises. So that's one thing that's quite impactful on our end. One small note also I want to add in terms of general observation is in the notion of digital, perhaps is somewhat a little bit blurry. It's a very broad term. I believe when we tackle also a digital transformation project, sometimes it gets in the way. Sometimes at the leadership level, there are maybe too many topics to embrace at the same time, and it can trigger some difficulties. So those are the few points I wanted to share with you.
Okay, Jerome, thanks very much. So turning now to Britton Davis, who's from Managing Director at Critical Insights and was previously General Manager Europe for Synthera at Smith & Nephew. He's worked in commercial medical devices for over 16 years. And so, Britton, perhaps if we bring you in at this point, if you were to just highlight one observation within digital transformation or perhaps customer engagement, what would you like to say to the audience?
Good morning, good afternoon all. Pleasure to be here. So my experience over those 16 years was the challenge within medical devices of really moving beyond incremental gains in various leadership roles, and most recently working with a number of digital health tech companies to bundle them together to deliver added value and get away from the increased commoditization of products within the orthopedic market space. And since leaving in December, my role is to work with a number of different technology companies to enable them to build that narrative in a startup format to help major corporates transform their business model. So for me, there's 2 points I want to make, and that is that as per the research that BCG published last year in a follow-up to their Milkman paper, they quoted in terms of a success an organization which you can Google and read about that did a digital transformation plan and engaging their customers with value beyond the product alone, so service and digital technology support, and that increased the shareholder value of that organization by 1.5 billion. So a significant change and significant increase compared to the mean in that market in medical devices. So that's a success in terms of a big scale. In a small practical scale, what I'm seeing more and more, certainly from my experience with Synthera, Smith & Nephew, and since leaving, is the vast number of medical device companies which are finally embracing digital health tech startups, which I'll talk about specific examples later. But in terms of just doing small practical pilots, which cost no more than $10,000, so a manageable budget for most people on the call, I'm sure, to do pilots within their key accounts, see how digital companies can really benefit their supply chain, their procurement process, their value of their product, patient engagement, augmented reality, virtual reality, simulation, etc. So I've got a number of examples I'll share on that, but we're certainly seeing more successes in that pilot phase as well.
Okay, sounds good, Britton. Thanks very much for that. And turning now to Marcus Ott, who is Global Head of Market Access and Policy at Excelsior Diabetes Care, but he's also an Executive Board member at MedTech Europe and has spent more than 20 years in the healthcare industry. So, Marcus, welcome. Perhaps same sort of question, if you could share just one observation with us to get things going.
Yes. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. Just one correction, I was a board member at MedTech Europe till the beginning of this year, but I'm still with the SVDI, which is the Swiss Diagnostics Association. So just as a correction, a little one. I guess when we talk about digital, we have to look at two angles. Digital transformation in terms of internal one, so using digital solution in order to make our business more transparent, getting more data for better decisions internally, and driving our business, far more precise and with much more enriched information as we had ever before. And this requires, change management as digital solution or transformation within the company means that it's touching the DNA of the company. So it's a lot broader than any other project that we had before. We look at capabilities, we look at skill sets for the future, and so on and so on. So it's much more broad than any other project internally. When we look at digital transformation as a solution, then we can notice that we are talking here as well about solutions that are beyond our offering so far. Offerings that enables, for example, value-based healthcare and enables as well certain things like pay for outcomes, because we can generate data and pulling data together and combining data so that this will be much more transparent as well in the future. But what we can acknowledge as well is that so far no traditional company has a clue or has been successfully marketing digital solutions with a sustained business model behind. It means that so far the solutions are not scalable enough in order to make money with it. But companies, collecting tons of data, today already, but how to get that out and how to create a new business out of it, that is not necessarily the scope of our traditional companies so far, but they all have to deal with it. And that means as well that we may enable with that digital transformation externally focused. So in terms of solution that we can offer, that we are going from treating people and treating these diseases to preventing diseases. And that is something, that payers and people in the field are very much interested right now in seeing what's coming there.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Marcus. So our final panelist and presenter will be Lars Diemer. He is CEO of Agnitio, and he leads an ambitious global team working to connect, inform, and empower healthcare stakeholders. He has served in numerous international roles in global technology companies prior to joining Agnitio. Now, Lars has a short presentation to set the scene for us. So, Lars, at this point, I'll hand over to you to present your slides. So, Lars, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you for the panelists and all the audience joining today. I'm pleased to hear the introductions here about the external trends facing our industry, the change management that's ongoing, and as well as the digital technology that needs to be applied. And so since that is sort of our main theme today, how to make digital work in medtech, I'm pleased with the observations so far. But I'm, of course, also going to try and challenge a little bit the way in which the industry works at the moment. So if we move to the first slide here and look at some of the external factors our industry is facing, well, I took along all of those most important factors, not just because they're all sort of macro factors that we all face, but also because of the fact that what has changed over the recent years is that they are all major factors are external. They are also all growing in importance, right? So we have to deliver, for example, additional value in our products and prove it with real-world evidence, yet the purchasing powers are now sitting with the administrators, and they have a sort of healthcare economic argument towards us, where sort of good enough is good enough. They, in other words, are not always willing to pay for the best of breed that most medtech companies have been striving for. So the overarching mission here is to understand how to deal with all of these challenges, how to focus our companies and our efforts on where we actually can change the game. And that's why I put customized engagement in the middle, be that with HCPs or with payers. But there's actually something that we can probably change as individual members of the medtech industry. That brings me to the next slide, where I've tried to exemplify how our change management behaviors are supposed to drive the changes in our business modeling. And at this point in time, I get the sense from speaking to a lot of different executives that we still do change management inside out. In other words, we make a strategic decision, board level down, find out what organizational changes we should make, what technology maps we should make, and then thereafter, on a good day, we get to the actual engagements, to the actual moment of truth, where you have the 5-8 minutes to convince a doctor or a payer or someone else that your medical technology is worth going for. So as an alternative to that, my proposal and the initial proposal is basically to look at the customized engagement or the engagements first, to take an outside-in view. How do we improve those minutes where we can actually change our fortunes and our revenues, as well as changing the treatment outcome ultimately. And then thereafter look at the technologies that can enable that and the data foundation that we need to prove our return on investment in going in that direction. So as part of our advice to focus on this sort of moment of truth, the actual engagements, we took one more step at that, and that's the following slide. So if you imagine focusing on the actual engagements with your different stakeholders, we would like digital technology to enable you to do some really well-planned interactions and to go into a much more interactive dialogue than you do today, where maybe you are presenting a PDF as opposed to a brochure, and therefore have gone digital, but only really sort of a step one. And we'd like, of course, for all decisions and dialogues to be based on data insights, which again should allow you to do a much better follow-up and a much better planning of the next event. So as an example, on the right-hand side of the screen there, when payers are growing so much in importance, as I think we have all established one way or the other, we need to talk straight into their needs for not just health economic arguments, but also for how to present benefits that improve treatment outcome. So you just sort of marry the health economic factors with the treatment outcome factors, which they are now being asked to evaluate our industry on. And with that, I believe it's time to try and ask ourselves during this webinar, what's holding us back from succeeding? And with that, I'd like to hand over to Dom.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much, Lars. So we started the first poll question, which was asking, what are the main factors stopping companies from embracing digital change? So there's still a few moments left if the audience would like to vote on that poll, what they think is holding companies within medtech back from fully embracing change. So we'll leave the poll question open just for 1 minute more. And just a quick reminder, if you've missed any of the earlier parts of the webinar or only just been able to join us, we are recording today's proceedings. So you will be able to have access to a recorded archived version shortly after the live event finishes. And you can send us your questions or comments at any time during the webinar, and we'll try and get through as many of those as we can during proceedings. Now, you can also send questions in addition to by clicking on the questions button on the screen in front of you if you'd like to do that. Or if you're a fan of Twitter, we will be tweeting about the webinar using the hashtag #PPWebinar. So you can use that hashtag to send us questions or indeed comments at any time. So to close the first poll question, so we'll stop voting on that now. And just looking at giving you a quick overview of the results there. So out in the front, although by no means a runaway winner, with 31% of the vote, was the main factor stopping companies within medtech from embracing digital change is that they feel the benefits of digital are at the moment unclear. Following, coming up behind that with 24% of the vote, as a main factor was that there's just no sense of urgency around embracing digital change, which clearly goes against the need for speed and rapid deployment within the digital space, with budgetary concerns and regulatory concerns certainly seen as not as important factors when it comes to embracing digital change. So now it's time to move on to the first of our 3 talking points. So the first one up we're going to focus on will be change management and meeting the new business model changes. So as the first of those, I'd like to look at how companies within medtech are delivering digital transformation within their own company. Jerome, we introduced yourself, so Jerome Dastros from Edwards Life Sciences. You were introduced first, so perhaps we can continue that just for the time being, and I'll bring you in at this point. In terms of at Edwards Life Sciences, how are you looking to deliver digital transformation at the moment?
Thanks, Dominic. I think it starts with insight, essentially. So the way we initiated a number of digital projects starts from market observation, audience research, investigation into the engagement preferences, also evaluating what either the competition is doing or some broader healthcare industry players are operating. So we usually, most of the decisions that are being made in digital projects are related to these insights. So effectively, metrics and ROI proof are pretty important. I think it ties pretty well into the results of the poll that we just had, as sometimes it's pretty difficult to prove what's going to be the impact of the digital initiatives. It also comes, in my opinion, with having the right teams and talent on board. As there might be in some situations some cultural clash or discrepancies between where we want to get in terms of digital level of comfort and where we are currently. So that's also a key point in our organization.
Okay, and just one quick follow-up question on that, Jerome. So in terms of, you mentioned the importance of getting the right teams and talent on board for this. Is there any kind of ideal mix of talent or ideal components that companies could be looking to ensure that they have in place?
Well, I believe the challenge with specifically with medtech is that we have already a mix of quite a specific industry, which is really having a strong understanding of what's needed for a healthcare audience, and there is a need for strong digital talent. So individuals who are able to understand the latest developments in digital platforms are there, with a good familiarity of digital marketing practice. So the combination of the two is not always easy to find. So what I find quite good usually is to have talent coming from industries that are not necessarily initially from the medtech, but industries that have some similarities with sometimes highly technical environments or strong B2B environments. That is my observation, and this is usually what I'm looking for.
Okay, thanks very much, Jerome. So, Marcus, I suppose if we could ask if we could bring you in at this point as well. So, in terms of your role at Exensio Diabetes Care, how have you been looking to deliver on digital transformation within your company?
I can echo what I already mentioned. So, without the endorsement of the CEO and then getting the whole company into that boat, digital transformation, it doesn't work. So it's a huge task. The change management, a huge task here, because there is attached to that digital transformation is a lot of uncertainty with employees. And as I mentioned already before, it's touching the entire DNA, so that we have to look at the current capabilities of the people that are already working with us. And then we have to look at the selection criteria for future employees, how that is addressing those, and whether there's a need in terms of changing those in order to hire for certain skill sets that are not available in the company so far. But how you look at it, because what it means as well, the main objective here is to have an end-to-end view, means that you look from a product idea to then finally manufacturing and leadership and marketing and sales and sell those solutions to the after-sales service. And what you're trying to do or trying to get is a holistic picture of your company processes and trying to optimize those processes as they are visible. What it does as well is that the transparency of each process done in isolation. So optimizing marketing and sales is fine because it's a silo and the people work together. But how does marketing affect sales, or how does manufacturing impact marketing? That is often, the interface or the transfer from one process to another might be not optimized, but the processes, the single silo might be optimized, but that doesn't mean that it's optimized for the whole company process, from the product idea or the manufacturing to the after-sales service. So what you can look at your process much more differentiated, and then having much more data available in order to make the right decisions. You can take a look at your KPIs almost in real time, so that you can far better steer the company in order to correct the course if you can see that something is not running smooth. But however, that leads or gives a lot of uncertainty to the people as well, and therefore that's something that you have to manage. What we did is looked for low-hanging fruits where we can see the impacts of digital right away, and creating success stories, so that we communicate that as well internally and highlight people who were instrumental for that change. So we looked at, for example, tender business, and trying to make that tender business much more smart and smooth, and getting data, from different countries, and combining that to a holistic picture of the tender landscape, for example, in Europe, so that you can recognize patterns from competitor in terms of pricing, offering, product features, and so on and so on. And, that increases then the likelihood that we could increase the likelihood of winning a tender significantly. And those success stories, low-hanging fruit, are instrumental, I guess, in order to enable bigger changes than from a transformational point of view within the company, in order to succeed with the entire transformation.
Okay, thanks very much, Marcus. So, Britton, we've heard there a bit about delivering on digital transformation in particular companies, and we saw, of course, in the first poll question in today's webinar that there's certainly some pretty big challenges within the sector when it comes to change management, digital transformation, and meeting the new business model changes. But despite those challenges, what would you say, are there particular key success stories for medtech with digital technology that we've seen to date?
Absolutely, I think absolutely there are, and I think my experience is very much the frustration that there's getting the balance right between, having CEO support, as Medtronic clearly do with Omar Shrek as the CEO and doing that, but we can't all wait for our CEO, whoever that might be, to determine the best way forward, or to give guidance or plan to do, a commercial business model change or innovation across, market capitalization companies that are in their tens of billions, if not bigger. So the successes we're seeing, and this is very much comes down to the individual and the culture of that individual. And when I talk about digital successes, I talk about transforming the supply of product to add value through services that you bundle together with that product, or you sell that service independently. So you can see out there from, in terms of major changes, you can look at Care Advantage from J&J. You can look at Sincera's program in the US now with Smith & Nephew. You can look at the value-based healthcare packages that Medtronic have put together. There's signature solutions from Zimmer Biomet. There's Stryker tried to do an element with a joint coach, which was an app-based patient engagement platform. Smith & Nephew have signed a contract with Well-Trained to do exactly the same. All of these are in the public domain, and this is where companies on a major scale are looking at partnering with digital health tech companies to deliver better value to their customer, be it the surgeon, be it the hospital, or be it the patient in that process. And then for me, most importantly for us on the call in terms of practical steps, we're seeing, certainly in the last 12 months, a huge increase of companies, med device companies partnering with startups, small digital health tech startup like Proximy, for example. If you go on proximy.com, it's a augmented reality digital health tech platform that is looking to take out cost, or is looking really globally to increase the scalability of surgical expertise. And for medical devices in particular, what we're seeing here is that it can help you scale your expertise in KOL management. It can take out costs through no longer needing to fly your KOLs everywhere. It gives you access to better KOLs globally to come to your meeting where they can dial in as opposed to traveling, which are obviously a big burden. So for me, it's around culture of the individual, the budget holder, having their immediate line manager support, allocating 5, 10, 15, 20% of your budget, being brave to do so, and allocating it to projects, like a small pilot project to test out the value that you're trying to deliver. So there's just some examples really I can share with you.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Bryn. So I think I'd like to bring in Lars Diemer now from Agnesio. So Lars, we've had an interesting question from the audience come in, and just a quick reminder to the audience, you can send us your questions at any time by clicking on the questions button. So this question that's come in that I'd like to get your thoughts on, it says, in my experience, it seems that sometimes resistance comes directly from people within the company itself, including top management. What are your thoughts about that? And is there a good way you can manage that kind of resistance?
Yeah, thanks. I do believe the audience member who raised that question or concern, in fact, is quite right. I have the benefit of talking to many executives across the industry, and I do sense a certain confusion and a certain doubt as to whether the return on investment is good to it invests in digital as opposed to many other initiatives that are on their plate, of course. So I think the message for us who work on these digital transformations and these change management topics is that, at the executive level, certainly, it's a numbers game, right? So unless we can prove in terms of ROI, or in terms of at least leading indicators that our efforts are most likely to succeed and more likely to succeed than your own business model, we're not going to get the airtime that we'd like. And the other thing is that many of the medtech, and it goes for the pharma industry as well, and many of the change programs are quite lengthy. So maybe picking up advice from the technology industry is a possibility, such as what for example, Bryn spoke to. How do you partner? How do you buy, or how do you build? To build, buy, or partner for acquiring as fast as possible some digital capabilities. And if done so, and if done correctly, you will have some early successes that you can use as stepping stones to build up your arguments with your management. Some early successes that it worked quite well in this particular country or this particular digital channel or these types of engagements. Let's build from there. So I'll say that also my two sort of comments on that particular question, which is in fact an excellent and a very central question.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Lars. So
Dominic, sorry, it's Dominic, it's Bryn here. Just to add to that question, and forgive me, I know we're pressed on time, but I think it's very important. My experience of 2 years of business model innovation with Smith and Nephew doing Sincera. If you look on Cafe Pharma, you'll see some of the comments directed at me about how crazy it is to change, how I'm taking food off the table for their children, how why am I trying to change the business model because we're all doing okay. I'm retiring in a couple of years. What are you doing to me? I think and that was within the organization of what I was doing, being called Judas and, changing things. Why would you do that? So I think it's really important to note that there's always going to be resilience from those who are laggards, in my view, in that happening. And I think it's really important. A practical answer for me would be have a very clear and focused goal of what you're trying to achieve, but allocate some budget to that. Be modest in your allocation of that budget. Just try and prove it on a really small scale. Take a very focused area in terms of the procedure or product. Get your leadership support in that in terms of your manager. You don't have to tell the world what you're doing, so do it in a quiet and stealthy way and get some practical outputs as success factors. And set out at the beginning, most importantly, that it's okay if it doesn't work. Having this comfort of failure within our industry is one that's a bit alien, both from a organizational culture perspective, but also from an individual ambition perspective. It's okay if it doesn't work because you'll take learnings and enable you to move forward in the future with better learnings and share those learnings. I just think it's really important to be aware of that. So be resilient, be brave, allocate some budget, be focused on your outputs, allocate some, get your boss on board and do it rather quietly at first to see if it works.
Thanks, Bryn. It's got some really good points there. So thank you for jumping in with those. So that's we've covered there change management and meeting new business model changes. In a minute, we're going to look at how digital technology is enabling these changes. Before we do that, we've got another little quick poll for the audience to answer. So that should have dropped down in front of your screen now. So what we'd like you to do is vote on the following question. What's the most decisive factor for ensuring a successful digital transformation? So whether you think it's taking a joint venture or partnership approach, achieving senior management buy-in, having a dedicated digital customer engagement team in place, or running internal programs to build digital competencies, or something else. So if you could cast your vote on that now. And whilst we do that, just a quick recap of some housekeeping points. So as I mentioned, you can send your questions to us at any time. And you can do that by either clicking on the questions button or contacting us via Twitter using the hashtag #PPWebinar. So whilst we leave the poll running for the moment, we'll move on to the next section, which is looking at how is digital technology enabling these changes. So let's see, perhaps we could, Marcus, I'd like to bring you in, but we're going to look at quite a whistle-stop tour of these answers, so we can look at sort of quick, reasonably short answers, so we can extract the maximum value from it. So Marcus, over to you. The question is, we can start off with is this: how does customer experience for payers and healthcare professionals need to change, do you think?
When we look at customer experience, then what digital definitely enables is KYC, which is know your customer. And if you know your customer, you can tailor solutions much better to the needs of certain customer types, certain customer groups. Here we talk about different needs from a payer perspective, different needs from a physician perspective, and definitely as well different needs from a patient perspective. And when we look at our patient population, I guess patient population is not a harmonic patient population. Everybody has different needs, has different triggers for certain events, and so on and so on. So personalization is enabled by digitalization. I guess and here you can create different tools that helps getting, from, for example, what I mentioned already, from a static picture of your disease when a physician sees a patient, for example, to continuous care. So shift from spot care to continuous care. That is one of the big things. So remote monitoring of patients, with chronic disease patterns like diabetes, like chronic heart diseases, whatever. And here, you can almost monitor a patient in real time and then really act when something is going into the wrong direction. But on the other hand, do not invite a patient if everything is fine. So it touches so many things, that digital enables and that could add value, and therefore you will get the attention as well from the payer community, because you can tailor the solutions in order to address it to patients that benefits the most, rather than going to a broad basis, which a payer don't like at all. So risk stratification tools, and coming here to that one, and the data is something where you can really make a big difference, because here you really can carve out those that react the most, and that is what is in the future is much more requested than in the past. And what I quickly wanted to elaborate is that the majority of the companies, that already engaged in digital solutions, no major player so far has launched globally to a broad base. Manual entry is cumbersome and lack of time allocation. So if your solution is only half digital and not totally digital and requires manual intervention, that is something which kills your digital solution as well. Then we have some privacy issues, and just recently the GDPR, which has changed. So customer expectations are much higher than in the past. We have further digital solutions that may please your business model from a company perspective, but leave the patient with a bad user experience. And the onboarding, if that is cumbersome, to your digital solution, nobody will act to it. Then we see as well lack of incentives that somebody sticks to a digital solution. So here, just as a buzzword, behavioral economics that you can address. So with giving certain incentives to the patient, you will enable digital solutions. You will have as well outcome changes, and that gives much more predictable outcomes to people, and that then act upon. Then we have
Marcus. Sorry, Marcus. That's great, but thank you very much for that answer. We'll definitely look to expand on that as we go forward. But if I can just bring out in some of the other panelists. But thanks, Marcus Ott from Excensia Diabetes Care. We'll certainly be coming back to you to expand on that. But Jerome Dastos from Edwards Life Sciences. From your point of view, how do you think customer experience for payers and healthcare professionals needs to change?
Thank you, Dominic. So I'll take my perspective. I'm not working so much with payer, mostly with the healthcare professionals. But in my view, there is a need for change in the way that healthcare professionals can make the best decisions for the best patient outcome. So it can be through allowing better access to the latest clinical guidelines. It can go through support with the product selection for the best patient outcomes. We're also looking at how we can leverage data gathered across different hospital in order to ensure optimal patient care, so length of stay, complications, etc., which leveraging best practice in different centers to make sure that most centers can use this. One thing also is that we observe that in the patient pathway there are a number of a number of gaps or information loss, and I believe this is also an area where customer experience can change, and digital can help connecting the dots in the patient pathway between from diagnosis to care to post-care. So these are the few points where I could see some solid change happening.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Jerome. Lars, I wonder if we could turn to you with a question now. So, in terms of how digital technology can enable companies to deliver more commercial value, and perhaps also powering commercial success. So, how can digital technologies help with that? Would you say?
Well, yeah, I would say that in general, digital technology has the possibility to either augment the traditional way of engaging, such as a face-to-face meeting with a doctor or a payer, for the representatives of the medtech company to join forces with some digital interactive technology, such as just plain old e-detailing, but also on teleconferences to actually be able to interact with the content that they are sharing. So in terms of customer value, I would say the recipient of all our communication, be it a doctor or a nurse or a peer, they all prefer for it to be interactive, intuitive. They also want to self-guide themselves. And if we can do so using digital technologies and at the same time capture interesting data that we can use for our next engagement and therefore make it better, then our relevance can be improved. And with relevance, it also allows us to extend the conversation beyond just one meeting or beyond just 5 minutes, and therefore improve our staying power, which again should lead to more commercial success.
Mm-hmm. And so, Lars, it sounds like we're talking about virtual engagement technologies there. What sort of technologies are there? What sort of virtual engagement technologies are there available, and how do you think they can help make these sorts of things happen?
Yeah. So I guess we're part of one just now, right? So we realize that a webinar can serve a certain purpose in terms of reaching a broad audience, having a level of interaction with the audience, seeing the opinions of audiences, and so on. And in fact, there are technologies out there that allow the audience to interact with the actual content. So like answer questions inside the presentations that are being shown. Allow for the audience to be part of a larger group chat and so on. So and all of that sort of to be captured as part of data. So you can either change and improve on the fly as part of the engagement, or you can regroup and make your next engagement better. So there are some technologies that go sort of beyond the traditional go-to-meeting or WebEx type of communication.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thanks very much, Lars. So we've had our second poll question of today running, which is looking at what's the most decisive factor for ensuring a successful digital transformation. And exactly half of the audience believe achieving senior management buy-in is critical in terms of a successful digital transformation, with perhaps a further quarter focusing on running internal programs to build digital competences. So clearly senior management buy-in followed by successful internal programs would appear to be, certainly from our audience, two key tips on things to focus on. Just a quick reminder then that before we go into our final section for today's webinar, you can send us your questions at any time by clicking on the questions button at the top of your screen, or on Twitter using the hashtag #PPWebinar. We're also recording proceedings today, so if you've missed any section of the webinar, or you have a colleague you think would benefit from listening in, then an archived version will be available shortly after the live event finishes. But now moving swiftly on to how do we prepare for tomorrow and really sort of optimize engagements using digital technologies. I suppose one part of the preparation would be looking at what's stopping us reaching this destination, what roadblocks to digital success remain, and how do we get around them. Britton Davis, so perhaps we can bring you in for this bit. So in terms of roadblocks to digital success, what would you say are the key things to be mindful of?
In the interest of time, I would say that and as per the poll, I think it's the challenge of the culture internally within your organization. So I think that's one factor that you need to, hence just getting, allocating your budget and then speaking to your direct boss and keeping it quiet and doing that is a practical way to avoid being drained by naysayers, which will tell you it won't work. I think the other part is the need to do this quickly, and it's interesting with the poll stating that build an internal program. I can imagine that being costly and time consuming, and how do you do that is another discussion. For me, I would seek, and I think one of the challenges is actually finding a digital solution that fits the needs of what you're trying to deliver to be successful. And when I say successful, it's not just about, and this is a challenge mentally for all of us, it's not just about increasing revenue or increasing profit in the immediate term. The measures of success might be engaging new customers that never use your product. It may be engaging, scoring higher on a tender as a result of differentiating your product. It may be engaging your sales force with a different sales message around the product which you're trying to say and getting feedback from an energized sales force. So I think we need to think a little bit more laterally from the immediate pressures of quarter to quarter, which is very easy to say. Having run the UK business and the European business, it's very difficult to do. So finding those partners is difficult. And I would echo what Jerome said. My final point, as Jerome said earlier, is about the challenge of finding people internally that have that mindset and have that, and you can recruit externally. But again, that's time consuming and costly. So my view would be when you find a partner that may work and do a case study that delivers what you want to deliver, learn from them, take their expertise, develop yourself, and then you'll have a better understanding of whether you should then joint venture, partner, recruit, or educate yourself on how to go forward.
Okay, well, thanks. And I'll turn now to Edwards Life Sciences Digital Marketing Manager, Jerome Dastros. So, Jerome, do you think medtech's too safe to change? Is it too difficult actually to rock the boat?
I don't think it's too safe to change. I think it's just quite a well established and structured industry with the regulatory constraint that we all know. So definitely there is some challenge there, but I do believe that the boat needs to be shaken because if it's not done, some other players will come and will disrupt the industry. So I think it's not a matter of yes or no. It needs to change. It's how it needs to be changed, and we're seeing some movement happening already. So I'm pretty optimistic about the future here. So I don't think it's too safe. I think it's just that the fact that we are in a well-established environment with a strong and stable business model that's been running for a long time makes it perhaps more difficult than in other industries to go beyond the current business model.
Okay, and let's see. Perhaps we can bring Marcus Ott from Excentia Diabetes Care in for the next question. So, Marcus, I've got one eye on the clock, so I'm mindful of our time for this. But if you're able to just pick out a few bullet-pointed practical changes that medtech companies can make right now, what would you suggest? What would be your key things for them to look at?
I guess traditional medtech is pretty, let's say, to a way unflexible in terms of triggering change by themselves. But what you can see is so far is that majority of companies who are successful in the field, they have formed partnerships with other players. And this is something where you can generate as well quick wins, because the learning curve you can cut dramatically by getting together with other key stakeholders from other sectors. Like, for example, Verily is a combination of Google and Sanofi, a company very successful in the AI business, looking for predictive algorithms, as well as other companies are popping in our traditional field and combining our devices with on top digital solutions for AI, for example, but as well others. So companies, in order to cut the learning curve, should be open for joint ventures, for dealing and getting companies in and employers change the criteria for hiring, for example. But this is key to success in the future, so that you can get early ROI on your investment. So that, but the good thing is that all the others, that come in our field, they have no clue about our traditional markets, or how to get products regulated, how to market it, what are reimbursement pathways, how are treatment pathways connected with the devices. And so we have a lot to bring to the table, and the biggest win is we have access to the patient, which they don't have. So they are open to joint ventures, and this is would be my recommendation in order to be very successful early, and then form successful alliances.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Marcus. Now, I'm going to turn to another question that's come in from the audience, and Lars, I think I'd like to pose this one to you, if you wouldn't mind. So the question is this: which kind of experiences or training would you recommend for someone who's coming from a traditional medical device or pharma industry business model, but that wants to jump into a more digitally enabled business model?
Yeah, that's a very good question again. Thank you for that. Well, I think the truth lies with the customers, with the stakeholders, and so perhaps the training is not one that is sort of external to the company that you're in currently. Maybe it's more a question of, regardless of current role, of changing that role into one that is in front of the customers and stakeholders as much as possible, until patterns start to emerge, and also you start being able to put some sort of success metrics around what needs to happen, because the metrics are what's going to convince the other group of important people besides the customers and stakeholders, namely the executives. They really want to see revenue as a function of cost of contact, for example, and how many minutes you get, how many key points you get across, and so on. Those are the ones they want to see as key indicators of success. So I think the training lies in being as close to the customer as ever possible, regardless of your role, and then transform from there into some digital initiatives.
Okay, thanks very much, Lars. And Britton, in terms of that particular question on recommendations for someone coming from a traditional background business model to a more digital one, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. There's a couple of things I would say in practical things to do would be, there's a great book out there about changing a mindset and looking at things differently, and many people have probably heard about it. It's called Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. You can read it in 40 minutes on the train. It's very simple. It's, even for me, I managed it pretty quickly. So I'd recommend that. And the other one that's a little bit more cumbersome, but I'd definitely recommend if you're interested, is Lund University in Sweden has a digital business model innovation course which runs online. It's free, and if you Google that, it talks about the transformation from traditional business models to digital business models, quoting Amazon, Google, Facebook, and how they've changed their business model over time, and you can apply those principles to med devices. And my final note is, Amazon last week, I think the week before, announced that they were selling spinal implants and spinal instruments online. So if we don't change as an industry, then someone else is going to come in and change it for us. So I encourage everyone to get that sense of urgency, and we can change it from within. So thank you.
Thanks, Britton. So clearly there a lot of urgency needed in terms of this for the medtech sector. So for those who appreciate the urgency involved, but are looking around now and thinking, well, that's all very well, but where do I start? Are there quick wins? Does the panel think that companies can be taking advantage of? Jerome, perhaps if I can pose that question to you, what quick wins would you say, if there are any, can medtech companies take advantage of?
It's a tough one because I think it depends on the kind of company you're in. I believe probably it would be with leveraging existing technologies such as virtual events or remote community management, virtual ad boards. Those are really the kind of things that can expand on existing experience with the current engagement model and go beyond it by providing the digital engagement. So that would be my take. So look at what you are currently doing and see how introducing some digital elements as part of the customer experience can make an impact, and then it can also act as a proof for your leadership that there are some benefits in introducing this digital model.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Jerome. And Marcus Ott from Excelsior Diabetes Care. What would you say in terms of quick wins? Are there any quick wins? Do you think you could outline very very quickly for us?
As I mentioned, you have to start small and then scale it up to big. So therefore, that you look where is a business need, and we started, for example, as I mentioned, with just simple tender business, the tender management business that we made smart, that we made accessible and transparent throughout the globe, so that we get insights. And then we connected that with CRM tools that we created newly, and so easy things, and combine and have a roadmap of things that you can add to the recipe rather than starting big, nothing gets done. So because those success stories are really important, for a company to succeed with the digital transformation. And what key is as well, take the uncertainty of your employees, that they think everything is changing and changes so much that you do not need them any longer. So digitalization often is associated with getting rid of people, because the digital world is managing everything. But you need the people, and that is one of the key things.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Marcus. And well, I think the final question I'd like to pose to one member of the panel at this stage. So it concerns ROI, and we know that return on investment within digital technology is key in order to be able to prove that you're making effective use of it. But Lars from Agnico, how would you say firms can ensure return on investment from their use of digital technology?
Yeah, there's plenty of possibilities to prove ROI. I alluded to one a few minutes ago, trying to make an estimate on your either revenue contribution or staying power as a function of your cost of contact. So if you take one digital technology, in fact the one that's growing fastest at us at the moment, it's virtual engagement, the ability to enrich the dialogue with your stakeholders while in a remote setting. There, we seem to be getting results that you have cost of contact that is 1/5 of the cost of contact or a face-to-face meeting. And you can use that to have some conversations with your executives as to whether you should in fact change your organization into more of a remote organization for certain parts of your stakeholders. The other proof point that serves as ROI is that if you can have a longer and richer engagement using your digital technologies, it must lead to some some of the sort of lagging indicators of success, at the end of all our initiatives, what's the revenue going to be? And I believe those two examples are what many medtech companies could start with as metrics.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Lars. There. So as I say, we're heading on the home stretch for this particular webinar, but we've covered an awful lot of really interesting ground. So if you weren't able to join us at the beginning of the webinar, we are recording things, so an archived version will be available shortly after the live event finishes. We've covered already change management, how digital technology is enabling change, and then also how do we prepare for tomorrow and really look to optimize engagements using digital technology. I'll turn now to our panel just to get from each of them one short take-home message to round off proceedings. Marcus Odd from Excelsior Diabetes Care. Perhaps if we could start from yourself, and with just one take-home message for the audience on digital transformation within medtech.
Yeah.
What would yours be?
Besides the senior management involvement, look for a simple solution with a great user experience. And more data does not mean better solution. You aggregate the data finally, for example, delivers then a great or determines the user experience. So work on that, and I guess that is my advice. Would be my advice.
Thanks very much, Marcus. And Jerome Dastros rather from Edwards Life Sciences. What's your take-home message for today's audience?
I would echo what Marcus just said. So we seem to agree that leadership buy-in is one really important thing here. I see also talent development and external partnership as being quite critical. And last but certainly not least, in my opinion, just keeping in mind patient is first, patient experience is first, and probably customer experience next, and that should drive the right actions from digital.
Okay, thanks, Jerome. And Britton Davis, on to you. What would be your take-home message?
Two comments. One is just commenting about ROI. My comment there would be, if someone can tell me the ROI of producing a flyer, a brochure, some materials, and can give me an exact ROI on that versus doing a different project, I'd be amazed, because a lot of marketing to quantify. And my take-home message is a focus goal: determine what success looks like. Partner with innovative customers. Partner with potential solutions. Get your boss on board. Do it quietly. Document your learnings. Be resilient, and then go all over again and do it again.
Thanks very much, Bryn. And Lars, finally, Lars from Agni's show. Do you have one take-home message for today's audience?
Yeah, I would say get inspiration from those organizations out there thinking in an agile way, so you can deliver small but fast improvements often to your stakeholders. Therefore, get started failing, but if you're failing, fail fast. And if you can give feedback back to your organization, get those feedback loops going fast, so that you can sort of stick under the nose of the executives small but perhaps significant wins that are actually delivered by digital technology. And then ultimately, brick by brick, it can build up the sort of the ambition in management and the trust in management, in that you can also launch some more strategic initiatives.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Lars. So, as I say, we're almost out of time now for today's webinar. But I think if we look back over proceedings and the really valuable ground that we've gone over, we've certainly heard a lot about the challenges of going beyond making simply incremental gains within this space. But we also heard how that if we're going to enable change, we're going to have to really do it from the inside out and look at the role and the place of senior management within that, whether from senior management or potentially from other colleagues. There will be some resistance to digital change, but as we've heard, there's a number of really useful strategies being presented that can help you overcome some of that resistance. And I think also it's with anything digital, it's worth bearing in mind that it's okay if something doesn't work first time. It's okay to keep trying, keep pushing away, and keep looking to break boundaries. I think ultimately, if I'm allowed myself one take-home message, it would be brave and be focused. So, as I say, we've come to the end of today's webinar. You can click on the feedback button to leave feedback on either today's topic, today's particular webinar, or any other future topics or webinars that you would like to see push forward the debate within this space. So I'd like to particularly thank our panelists today, who have been Jerome Dastros, Digital Marketing Manager from Edwards Life Sciences, Britton Davis, Managing Director of Critical Insights and previously General Manager Europe for Synthera at Smith & Nephew, Marcus Ott, who's a Global Head Market Access and Policy at Excensia Diabetes Care, and Lars Diemer, who's Chief Executive Officer from Agnesio. So in addition to thanking our panelists, of course, I must extend my thanks to all of you who've dialed in today. If you would like to follow up on the topic or contact Agnesio directly about this, you'll be able to see their contact details on your screen now, both an email address and then a telephone number. All that remains then for me to do is to thank everyone for their time and to say see you next time. Okay, thanks very much then. Goodbye.